Welcome to our new series of Installation Insights, where we bring you some informal, quick-fire perspective and thought leadership in video form from a variety of movers and shakers from in and around the professional AV community. We start with some insight from our Pro AV Technology Outlook report, which looks at the application and adoption of AV systems and technologies across a variety of market verticals, and of course the immediate and longer lasting impacts of the pandemic period. Our main contributing partner for the report is Futuresource Consulting, and I spoke to James Kirby, Pro Audio Analyst, to discuss his contribution to the report, which analysed how the Pro Audio marketplace has fared over the course of the last 15 months or so, and the brighter horizons that lie in wait in 2022. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really varied market, and I think it's best to kind of split it down into a few key areas, including kind of rental, install, and then you've got the hybrid learning piece and kind of AV conferencing, and really different areas. They can't exactly be kind of grouped together. So some real highs within that on the AV conferencing and hybrid learning side, but then kind of the touring side being the real contrast to that, which has suffered significantly out throughout the pandemic. The install space kind of sits in the middle of that, with some positivity and in many ways more positive than expected through the depths of the pandemic. But kind of the live event side of that, so installed large venues, theaters, even small venues taking a real kind of brunt of the COVID decline in the install market, and other areas such as kind of PAVA doing better, more focused on construction, although still suffering a little bit of kind of that construction delay and demand decrease during that really tough period. So overall, I mean, it's been a very difficult situation across the board, really. Some few kind of areas of positivity within that. It's been a really tough time for the touring market. I mean, it's kind of the classic phrase that's been used is the first to go and the last to come back, and that's absolutely true. And we're still seeing huge challenges in that market. You know, as a result of decline in that space, I know there's a lot of brands dependent on that market. We've seen, unfortunately, job losses, severe declines. I mean, that the industry have never witnessed before. That said, I mean, coming kind of out of this situation and looking at the vaccine levels that we're seeing in key markets. I mean, the UK is a good example, but also the US, you know, very high levels of vaccinations there. And so there seems to be a bit of light at the end of the tunnel for kind of manufacturers now, and certainly the events market. And a big conversation at the moment is kind of turned from a really difficult situation with no sign of coming out of it to this more set on 2022 as a target for really one of the best years for live events that we've seen to date. A lot of that pent-up demand coming from consumers ready to get out, but also the supply of performers wanting to get back out on stage and provide that supply of kind of high quality acts. So a better than ever 2022 for a lot of events companies. There's still going to be challenges to that, of course, and those structural impacts within the industry, which have been really serious throughout this time. And then on the manufacturer side, you know, the reality is it's going to take some time to filter through to those manufacturers. So it's not going to be an immediate recovery for the manufacturer side or for the channel side. In some respects, you know, rental companies are going to be sweating stocks. There's going to be a pretty big opportunity for second-hand equipment of rental companies that have dissolved during this time, and will continue to over the coming months if they don't receive the support that they require. But there is some positivity coming from kind of government contributions, redevelopment plans. The US announced a 16 billion culture redevelopment plan recently, and you can see similar sort of activity across Europe and the UK of around kind of 2 billion culture recovery funds, around in euros, that is. So some positivity and confidence coming there, and that's really looping all together to drive a bit more confidence and light at the end of the tunnel, which is becoming the common phrase at the moment. Yeah, I mean, from an overall install perspective, it's been much more positive. You've had these large projects that are related to industries, multi-billion dollar industries, which have kind of continued to go ahead, have had kind of the long-term investment plan. So that's kind of one component of it. They're just massive projects that have taken years in the planning, and there's sort of not a way to put a hold on that. And for example, the sports stadium market, there's huge investment in that kind of sector, the sports sector, and that's not going to switch off overnight. People want to continue these developments. When you look at the live venue side of things, there's been struggles, definitely. I mean, many venues have been shuttered over the pandemic and haven't been have been earning next to nothing during that time. So certainly a challenging time. There has been some government support, which has helped somewhat, and also some unique areas of positivity. Like we look at the houses of worship market in the US, which has been more stable through kind of remote outreach and donations in the virtual domain, that have actually helped kind of income during that time, so to speak. So some unique areas of positivity there on kind of the live events install side, but it's been financially crippling for a lot of companies during this time. That said, the positivity that we've seen in those large projects and the continued confidence that we've seen in the fact that live music is going to come back. We've had people investing in systems for when live music comes back or when live performance comes back, and that's really significant. And for big brands that are in kind of the touring space, provide those large sound reinforcement systems, it has been a really key opportunity during this time, and has been way more stable than the rental market has. In some cases, it's acted as a little bit of a life raft for kind of the live performance industry, and a much needed one. But the other side of the market, so kind of commercial install, background music, PAVA, that's provided a bit more stability overall, for brands that are diversified across the two. Of course, it's a much better situation as well for those. We have seen troubles though in kind of the retail sound market, especially on those fast moving projects, for background music and kind of smaller projects that don't have the same kind of lead times that those larger projects do. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and there's tons of different phases when these different markets will come back. I think the retail side of things that we were looking at earlier is kind of a big question mark for the industry at the moment. How does retail look moving forwards? It's interesting to look at how over time this market, physical retail, has been kind of slipping into decline, and online retail has become so important. But during that time, the spend on AV in those verticals has become even more important, owing to kind of the showroom effect and the desire to make those shopping experiences the center of the brand, really, and provide a great brand image for those retailers. And I think actually those kind of dynamics can be intensified following the pandemic. People want to bring shoppers back to the high street. They want to use their physical spaces even more effectively to promote their brand, because let's face it, it's becoming more dependent on that to justify the physical retail space. So that's a really interesting factor there. I think we'll see kind of a little bit of investment as we come out of the pandemic, but it's going to be a tough time for that market with closures as well. But we can see a good bounce back of that market. It experienced significant decline over this period, but a strong bounce back over kind of the next couple of years. Kind of 2022 sort of time period. Others touring is going to be much longer. We'll have those again delayed filter effects through to manufacturer and kind of the sweating of stocks and so on. The installed leisure part of the market is an interesting one, and we expect that to come back faster than the kind of touring market itself. Really because that's direct sales, people moving faster and immediate investments in that market. However, there's also concerns around kind of the delay in the project pipeline, people not going ahead with things that were last year, kind of large projects, cancelled stadium construction and things like that, having a longer term impact on that market. So a few concerns for that as well, but we do expect kind of a full market recovery of pro audio as a total market kind of in 2022, with some of those markets being a little bit more delayed. And of course, that AV conferencing and hybrid learning factor helping massively to that. I mean, those are the markets that really haven't declined and are expected to still bounce back after the pandemic, really moving into kind of the end of 2021. The kind of pro audio side of conferencing, people basically deciding to upgrade all their equipment and focus on that quality component after having, let's face it, a year of some kind of challenges with audio quality. I know personally, I've had some of those, and I'm sure many share the same feelings. So it's about getting that kind of AV conferencing strategy right as people return to the office for their part-time work, and that's another area of positivity we're expecting to see. We'll be looking at a range of things. Of course, we have quarterly market trackers across the industry, across the AV industry, which we'll be looking at closely. From a loudspeaker side, for example, we recently developed the loudspeaker tracker, which now has kind of direct data feeds from a lot of the key brands in the industry. So that's something we'll be watching on a quarterly basis. And already we're seeing kind of things pick up from that perspective. So that's our kind of key barometer really overall, and our conversations with manufacturers and channels throughout the industry. Really kind of the early signs, and we're already seeing the early signs really, is those install markets coming back with confidence, even more confidence than before, kind of preempting the return of live events and those sort of applications. Otherwise, I think there's a few kind of financial measures that you can look at throughout the industry. I think an interesting one is Live Nation's share price, for example, which is actually higher than it's ever been at the moment. Kind of preempting the return to live events. They've also done a lot in virtual events as well, which is really interesting, but definitely kind of preempting that physical event space returning. I think also the kind of redevelopment funds are showing positivity kind of across the market. The release of those redevelopment funds is also an indication and striking confidence throughout the industry at the moment. And that's not just for live events, but also for kind of retail and hospitality as well. I think there'll be a few phases for retail and hospitality in particular, which include kind of the the lenience on travel restrictions and things like that owed to tourism, which is a huge part of the hospitality industry, of course, and that will be another key indicator. But really, overall, vaccine levels is a huge indicator at the moment, because all these live events, all the opening of these local places depend on the regulations in each country, which therefore depend on the vaccination levels. So that's of course a key consideration in this as well. Absolutely. I think it's events in general, right? Virtual is not going away. There's no doubt of that. There's been a huge investment by not only kind of promoters out there and event organizers to promote the virtual domain during this time, but also the skills learned within internal marketing teams, which is really important. Those that may have never kind of dabbled in virtual events before, or physical events, maybe got event organizers to do it for them previously, or outsourced that, have been investing resources within the virtual domain, which I think has a couple of exciting angles to it, I guess. I mean, the impact on trade shows, I think people will probably be looking at their own virtual events and own product launch events in the virtual domain more and more moving forwards. I mean, certainly that's been a case throughout the pandemic, but kind of that won't go away overnight. When you look at the opportunity to physical events moving forwards, you've got these skills within companies, and people have been able to test out the opportunity for kind of brand-led events for the first time. So you could actually see, particularly in kind of the view of AV market opportunity, people actually investing in their own internal event spaces, whether that's a virtual event space, a hybrid event space, so kind of on-premises events, and that taking an interesting opportunity moving forwards. But certainly that trade show landscape has changed, but will always offer great business opportunities, great relationship building mechanics there. So I don't see that going away overnight, as it were. Yeah, I think learning has been the key thing, right? And we were just talking about it there, right? In internal marketing teams, events teams, learning new skills, investing in new technology. It's incredible how the industry has adapted throughout this time and used technology to its advantage. I mean, running kind of live broadcast from home, that's a key example, right? Extremely difficult, wouldn't be possible without the current technology that we have in the AV industry, and really that's come about in recent times, and the ability to do that as easily as we can do it now with kind of audio over IP, AV over IP, and those technologies lending a hand, of course. I think there's so many examples of that throughout the current kind of situation. If you look at kind of the event side of the industry, I think diversification is a key takeaway. Those that have diversified over recent years, or are a diversified company, have fared better, rather than those that kind of are focused on the touring market. So I think further diversification into the installed markets is something that's happened naturally over the past year. Those touring manufacturers have turned up the volume on, excuse the pun, but turned it up in terms of their focus on installed leisure kind of applications. Definitely turn that up to 10, and moving away from that kind of touring market a little bit towards those spaces and investing money there. As far as kind of the channel goes, then I think that's also the same kind of discussion. We've also got I mentioned Promoter Live Nation investing in virtual events, and actually installing, commissioning installs of equipment in their venues that they have, to facilitate that kind of virtual hybrid event moving forwards, and so further diversifying their business. So I think really those are kind of the main takeaways, and I think learning itself is a huge thing. I think something that's been clear throughout the pandemic is this kind of end user focus and quality equipment going to the end user, in terms of kind of everything from conferencing to kind of audio creation through to the video bloggers of the world and things like that. I know that's been a incredibly successful market, and throughout the past year, it's certainly we've had manufacturers experiencing significant growth, 100% product growth in some places, which is phenomenal. And the power of that end user in bringing content to the table, really impressive content, not just the end user, but also those internal small marketing teams that are now kind of empowered to produce this extremely high quality content. And that's definitely something we'll be looking at this year. We've got various reports kind of looking at the content creation space for audio, and of course the conferencing side, and how those two kind of connect in the middle more and more. Yeah, I think so, and I think that's something that will come as a result of the pandemic, and we will see the effects of that longer term. I think it's always a challenge, and everyone will say this, to demonstrate the effects, the benefits of audio, especially as a user who's not, listening to the audio back on their side of the call and things like that. So there's challenges within that, but absolutely, I think the whole year has been that learning experience, right? And audio has been a key part of that, being told your headset has a buzzing noise through to your room's too echoey, and so I think there's a natural increase in the knowledge surrounding audio and how important it is to calls. I think that virtual event component coming in as well, and kind of looking for a hybrid opportunity across those, and really looking at quality, providing almost a broadcast worthy production within the meeting room, and using professional audio equipment and higher up quality audio equipment to do that. That's certainly a key consideration moving forwards.